The distant rumble of thunder punctuated the twilight as Zachary Standish's carriage, a gleaming mahogany and brass testament to her family's wealth, splintered its wheel against the jagged rocks of the creek crossing, sending her lurching forward with a startled cry. It was 1878, and the untamed territory of Wyoming cared nothing for her silk dress or the prestigious Boston name she carried. "Whoa there," the driver called out, his weathered face pinched with concern as he climbed down to assess the damage. "Miss Standish, I'm afraid we've got ourselves a real problem. That wheel's beyond repair, and night's coming fast with that storm." Zachary straightened her posture and adjusted her hat, refusing to let the situation unsettle her composure. At 26, she had navigated Boston's most treacherous social waters. Surely a broken carriage wheel wouldn't be her undoing. Still, the darkening sky and the vast emptiness surrounding them sent an unfamiliar shiver of vulnerability through her. "How far to Aurora?" she asked, attempting to keep her voice steady. "Another 15 miles, miss, but there's a small homestead just up yonder ridge. Might be our best hope before this storm breaks." Zachary nodded, swallowing her disappointment. She had not traveled 2,000 miles to be delayed now. Her plan to purchase land in Aurora and establish a proper ladies' finishing school in the West was already behind schedule. The death of her father 3 months prior had left her with a substantial inheritance, and, more importantly, freedom from the suffocating expectations of Boston society. As they approached the modest homestead on foot, leading the horses, Zachary took in the simple but well-maintained property. A small cabin with a sturdy porch stood beside a barn weathered by seasons of Wyoming's harsh elements. A vegetable garden, meticulously tended, stretched behind the cabin, and she could see a few cattle grazing in a distant pasture. Before they reached the gate, the cabin door swung open, and a man emerged, rifle in hand but pointed downward. Behind him, partially hidden by his tall frame, stood a small child with curious eyes. "That's far enough," the man called, his voice firm but not unkind. "State your business." Zachary's driver explained their situation while she observed their potential host. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His clothes were worn but clean, and despite his cautious stance, his eyes held no malice. "I'm Wade Anderson," he said finally, lowering his rifle completely. "This is my daughter, Lucy." The little girl, no more than 6 years old, peered out from behind her father's legs, her brown eyes wide with curiosity. "Zachary Standish," she replied with a slight bow of her head. "I apologize for the intrusion, Mr. Anderson, but I wonder if we might impose upon your hospitality until morning. Our carriage has suffered damage, and we require shelter from the approaching storm." Something flickered in Wade Anderson's eyes, recognition of her accent, perhaps, or the quality of her clothing that marked her as an outsider. Yet he nodded and stepped aside. "Storm's coming fast. You and your driver are welcome to wait it out here. I can take a look at your carriage tomorrow." The first drops of rain began to fall as they hurried inside, the heavens opening up just as Lucy closed the cabin door behind them. The interior was modest, but surprisingly comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, surrounded by handcrafted furniture. Shelves lined with books suggested that Wade Anderson was more than just a simple rancher. "Lucy, fetch some towels for our guests," Wade instructed, and the child scampered off eagerly. To Zachary, he added, "It's not what you're accustomed to, I imagine, but it's dry and warm." "Your home is lovely, Mr. Anderson," Zachary replied sincerely. "Thank you for your kindness." The evening progressed more comfortably than Zachary had anticipated. Wade proved to be an excellent cook, preparing a hearty stew that far surpassed the bland meals she'd endured on her journey west. Little Lucy, initially shy, soon warmed to their guest, especially when Zachary expressed genuine interest in the child's collection of carved wooden animals. "My daddy makes them," Lucy explained proudly, placing a delicately crafted horse in Zachary's palm. "Your father is very talented," Zachary remarked, truly impressed by the detail. "It passes the time during winter evenings," Wade said with a shrug, though she caught the hint of pride in his voice. After dinner, Lucy fell asleep beside the fire, and Zachary's driver excused himself to check on the horses in the barn. Left alone with Wade, Zachary found herself curious about this man who lived so differently from anyone she'd known before. "How long have you been in Wyoming Territory, Mr. Anderson?" Wade settled into a chair across from her, the firelight catching the angles of his face. "Going on 8 years now. Came out after the war with Lucy's mother." "And she is?" Zachary hesitated, realizing she hadn't seen any sign of a wife. "Sarah passed 4 years ago. Pneumonia took her one winter," he said simply, though the grief still shadowed his eyes. "Been just Lucy and me since then." "I'm sorry for your loss," Zachary offered, understanding now the special bond between father and daughter. "Life continues," Wade replied, his gaze drifting to his sleeping child. "We manage. Now, what brings a Boston lady all the way to Wyoming? Don't often see your kind in these parts, unless they're passing through to somewhere more civilized." Zachary smiled at his directness. "I'm establishing a school in Aurora, a proper finishing school for young ladies to bring a touch of refinement to the frontier." Wade's eyebrow arched skeptically. "Aurora's barely more than a few buildings and a lot of hope, Miss Standish. Not sure there are enough young ladies there to fill a schoolroom." "The railroad is coming," she countered, "and with it, families seeking opportunity. Where there are families, there is need for education." "Fair enough," he conceded, "though I imagine your kind of education involves a lot of tea pouring and fan waving." Zachary felt a flash of indignation. "My curriculum includes literature, mathematics, sciences, and yes, social graces, all of which are valuable regardless of geography, Mr. Anderson." To her surprise, a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You've got spirit, I'll give you that. You'll need it out here." The storm raged through the night, rain pounding against the cabin's roof, while lightning illuminated the sparse room in brief, brilliant flashes. Zachary, given Wade's bed while he slept on a pallet by the fire, found herself strangely comfortable in the unfamiliar surroundings. There was something honest about this place, no pretense, no social maneuvering, just the straightforward business of living. Morning arrived with clear skies and birdsong. Zachary emerged from the bedroom to find Wade already up, cooking breakfast while Lucy set the table. The domesticity of the scene touched something unexpected within her. "Good morning, Miss Standish," Wade greeted her. "Hope you slept well." "Surprisingly so, thank you," she replied, smoothing her rumpled traveling dress. After breakfast, Wade accompanied Zachary and her driver back to the stranded carriage. The damage was worse than initially thought, not just the wheel, but the axle as well had been compromised. "This needs proper repair," Wade determined after careful examination. "I can't fix this here with what I have." "How long will it take to procure the necessary parts?" Zachary asked, already calculating the delay to her plans. The smith in Aurora could do it, but it would take at least a week, maybe longer. Wade straightened up, wiping his hands on a cloth. "There's another option. I'm heading into Aurora day after tomorrow with some cattle to sell. You're welcome to stay until then, and I'll take you in my wagon." Zachary hesitated. Another 2 days at the homestead seemed an unnecessary delay, yet the practicality of Wade's offer was undeniable. Her driver could remain with the carriage once basic repairs made it towable, bringing their belongings when it was ready. "That's very kind, Mr. Anderson. If you're certain it's no imposition." "No imposition," he assured her. "Lucy would enjoy the company, not many visitors out this way." And so Zachary Standish, Boston's socialite, found herself temporarily residing in a frontier cabin with a widowed rancher and his young daughter. The first day passed in unexpected pleasure. As she helped Lucy with her reading lessons, the child was bright, but had limited formal education, with Wade teaching her as best he could. She's quite intelligent, Zachary told Wade that evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in hues of gold and purple. Lucy had gone inside to prepare for bed. Gets that from her mother, Wade said softly. Sarah was always reading, always learning. You miss her very much, Zachary observed. Wade nodded, his profile strong against the fading light. Every day, but I promised her I'd give Lucy a good life no matter what. That's what keeps me going. Is that why you stay here? This seems a difficult place to raise a child alone. This land gives us freedom, Miss Standish. Maybe not the comforts you're used to, but something more valuable, the right to determine our own path. He turned to look at her directly. Why did you really leave Boston? Surely there are plenty of young ladies there who need finishing. The question caught her off guard. I wanted to build something of my own, she admitted. After my father died, I realized I'd spent my entire life following a path others had chosen for me. The West offered a chance to create something meaningful on my terms. Wade studied her for a long moment. Seems we're not so different after all. The next day, Zachary accompanied Wade as he tended to his small herd of cattle. Despite her impractical attire, she had changed into her simplest traveling dress. But it was still wholly unsuited for ranch work. She insisted on learning about his daily life. Never pictured a Boston lady wanting to know about cattle, Wade commented as he showed her how to check a young calf for signs of illness. I find I'm curious about many things I never considered before, she replied, carefully mimicking his gentle handling of the animal. There's something refreshing about work with such tangible results. Wade laughed, a rich sound that Zachary realized she had come to enjoy. Tangible is one word for it. Smelly might be another. She joined in his laughter, surprised at how comfortable she felt in his presence. Perhaps my finishing school curriculum should include animal husbandry. Now that would be a sight, he grinned. Boston society ladies learning to birth calves. Their easy banter continued throughout the day, and Zachary found herself noticing small details about Wade that she hadn't before, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness of his hands despite their strength, the quiet confidence with which he moved through his world. That evening, after Lucy had gone to bed, Wade brought out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. Not proper Boston tea, but it warms better on cold nights, he said, pouring her a small measure. Zachary accepted the glass, their fingers brushing momentarily. To new experiences, she offered as a toast. And unexpected guests, he returned, tapping his glass against hers. As the whiskey warmed her throat, Zachary found herself sharing stories of her life in Boston, the suffocating social expectations, her father's resistance to her independence, her dreams of creating an educational institution that valued knowledge over social standing. Wade listened attentively, occasionally offering insights that revealed his own thoughtful nature. He told her of his time fighting in the war, how he'd met Sarah, a nurse, during his recovery from a wound, and their decision to seek a fresh start in the West. She was braver than me, he admitted. Never complained, even when times were hard, said beauty could be found anywhere if you looked for it. She sounds remarkable, Zachary said softly. She would have liked you, Wade replied, his eyes meeting hers in the lamplight. Your determination reminds me of her. Zachary felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the whiskey. I would have liked to meet her. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities, until Wade cleared his throat and stood. Dawn comes early. We should get some rest before the journey tomorrow. The morning of their departure, Zachary felt an unexpected reluctance to leave the homestead. In just 2 days, the simple cabin had begun to feel familiar, and the prospect of saying goodbye to Lucy brought a surprising ache to her heart. The little girl presented Zachary with one of her father's carved animals, a delicate wooden bird. So you remember us, she said solemnly. Zachary knelt to embrace her. I could never forget you, Lucy. Perhaps you'll visit me in Aurora sometime. You could be my first student. Lucy's face brightened. "Could I, Daddy?" Wade, loading the last of their supplies into the wagon, nodded. "We'll see, sweetheart. Miss Standish will be busy with her school." "I would always have time for Lucy," Zachary assured him, rising to her feet. The journey to Aurora took most of the day, the wagon considerably slower than her carriage would have been. Yet Zachary found herself savoring the time, listening as Wade pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area's settlement. As they crested the final hill, Aurora came into view, a small but growing town nestled in a valley, with the promised railroad tracks already stretching toward it from the east. "There it is," Wade said. "Your new kingdom." The town was indeed smaller than Zachary had envisioned, consisting of a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church spire rising above them, and scattered houses spreading outward. Yet it held promise, and she felt a surge of determination to realize her vision here. Wade guided the wagon to the town's only hotel, a 2-story structure that, while rustic by Boston standards, appeared clean and well-maintained. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong at her waist. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Anderson," she said formally, suddenly aware that their time together was ending. "Your hospitality was most appreciated." "Wade," he corrected gently. "After sharing my home and my whiskey, I think you can use my given name." She smiled, a hint of color warming her cheeks. "Wade, then, and I am Zachary." "Zachary," he repeated, the name sounding different in his voice. "Good luck with your school. This town could use someone like you." With a final nod, he climbed back into the wagon. Lucy waved enthusiastically from her seat beside him, and Zachary waved back until they disappeared around a corner. The hotel proprietor, a friendly woman named Mrs. Hollister, welcomed Zachary warmly and showed her to a comfortable room. After settling in, Zachary ventured out to explore Aurora and locate the property she had arranged to purchase through correspondence. The town was busier than it had appeared at first glance, with miners, ranchers, and merchants going about their business. Women were fewer in number, but present, many looking at Zachary with curious eyes as she passed in her fine Eastern clothing. Her property, when she found it, was a large empty lot at the edge of town with a partially constructed building. The foundation and frame were complete, but much work remained. The seller, Mr. Peterson, met her there and apologized for the delay in construction. "Labor's scarce with the railroad hiring everyone," he explained. "But it's good land, solid foundation. You made a wise investment, Miss Standish." Zachary surveyed her purchase with a critical eye. Despite the unfinished state, she could envision her school taking shape here. Large windows to allow natural light, spacious classrooms, perhaps a garden where students could learn botany alongside etiquette. "When can work resume?" she asked. "That's the trouble, madam. Might be weeks before I can get a crew together." Zachary's spirits fell. Without a building, her school could not open, and her funds, while substantial, were not infinite. Delay meant paying for accommodations and living expenses without any income. That evening, as she dined alone in the hotel's small restaurant, Zachary considered her options. She could return east, admit defeat, but the thought was intolerable. She had come too far, both literally and figuratively, to surrender now. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mind if I join you?" She looked up, startled to see Wade standing beside her table. "I thought you would be heading home by now." "Business took longer than expected," he explained, taking a seat when she gestured her permission. "Cattle prices are down, might need to wait a few days for a better offer." Something in his tone suggested there was more to his extended stay, but Zachary didn't press. Instead, she found herself sharing her disappointment about the school building's status. "Construction halted and no workers available to continue," she concluded. "Mr. Peterson claims it may be weeks." Wade considered this. "I know something about building, started my cabin from nothing but trees and determination." "Are you offering to help construct my school, Mr. Anderson?" Zachary asked, surprised. "Wade," he reminded her. "And not single-handedly, but I know men who might work for fair pay if I vouch for you. Might not be as fancy as you're used to, but it would be solid." Zachary studied him, puzzled by his offer. "Why would you do this? You barely know me." Wade's eyes met hers, serious and sincere. "Maybe I made a promise once to help where I could, or maybe I just think this town needs what you're bringing to it." After a pause, he added quietly, "And maybe I'm not ready to say goodbye to you just yet." The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Zachary felt her heart quicken. "I would be most grateful for your assistance, Wade, and I confess I'm not ready for goodbyes either." Their arrangement was quickly settled. Wade would remain in Aurora for 2 weeks, helping to organize and supervise construction crews for Zachary's school. Lucy, too excited by the prospect of town life to be sent home with a neighbor, would stay as well. The following days established a routine. Mornings found Zachary and Wade at the construction site, where his practical knowledge and connections proved invaluable. By the end of the first week, walls were rising and the building was taking definite shape. Afternoons, Zachary often spent with Lucy, exploring Aurora and beginning informal lessons. The child's quick mind and natural curiosity made her an ideal student, and Zachary found teaching her deeply satisfying. "You're good with her," Wade observed one evening as they walked back to the hotel after dinner. Lucy skipped ahead, chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk. "She makes it easy," Zachary replied. "She reminds me why I wanted to teach in the first place, to nurture that spark of discovery." Wade nodded thoughtfully. "Sarah would have wanted her to have a proper education. That was always the plan before." "Before you were left to manage everything alone," Zachary finished softly. "It hasn't been easy," he admitted. "The ranch demands so much time. Some days I worry I'm failing her." Zachary surprised herself by reaching out to touch his arm. "You could never fail her, Wade. She adores you." His hand covered hers briefly, warm and reassuring. "Thank you for saying that." As they reached the hotel, Lucy turned to them, her face alight with excitement. "Can Miss Zachary read me a story tonight, Daddy?" Wade glanced at Zachary, eyebrows raised in question. "I would be delighted," she replied, her heart warming at the child's request. That night, after Lucy had fallen asleep to tales of far-off adventures, Zachary and Wade sat together in the small sitting room adjacent to their hotel rooms. The quiet intimacy of the moment wasn't lost on either of them. "You've changed since you arrived in town," Wade observed. "You seem lighter somehow." Zachary considered this. "Perhaps I am. In Boston, I always felt I was playing a role, the dutiful daughter, the proper society lady. Here I can simply be myself." "And who is that?" Wade asked, his voice gentle. "I'm still discovering her," Zachary admitted, "but I like her better than the person I was pretending to be." Wade's smile reached his eyes. "I like her too." The air between them seemed charged with possibility, but neither moved to close the distance. Instead, they talked late into the night, sharing hopes and fears with a candor Zachary had never experienced before. As the second week of construction progressed, Zachary began to worry about what would happen when Wade and Lucy returned to their homestead. The school building would be enclosed and secure by then, though interior work would continue. Her driver had sent word that the carriage was repaired and her belongings safely stored in town. Everything was proceeding according to plan, except for the unexpected feelings growing in her heart. The solution presented itself unexpectedly during a town meeting, which Zachary attended to introduce herself and her educational vision to the community. The reception was largely positive, with several families expressing interest in enrolling their daughters once the school opened. As the meeting concluded, the town mayor approached Zachary with a proposition. "Miss Standish, the council has been discussing the need for education for all Aurora's children. We've no teacher for the younger ones, especially the boys. We wonder if you might consider expanding your school's scope to include general education, at least until we can secure a dedicated teacher." Zachary glanced at Wade, who stood nearby and saw encouragement in his eyes. "I would be honored," she replied, suddenly seeing a broader purpose for her endeavor than she had originally envisioned. Later, walking back to the construction site, Wade seemed thoughtful. "A school for all the children," he mused. "That's a fine thing you're doing." "It makes sense," Zachary replied. "Education shouldn't be limited to those who can afford finishing." "Lucy could attend," Wade said cautiously, "if we lived closer to town." Zachary's heart skipped. "Are you considering moving to Aurora?" "Been thinking about it," he admitted. "The ranch is isolated, fine for cattle, not so good for a growing girl who needs schooling and friends." He hesitated before adding, "And there are other reasons Aurora seems more appealing lately." Their eyes met, and Zachary understood the unspoken meaning in his words. "I would welcome having Lucy as a student," she said softly, "and having you nearby." The days that followed were filled with purpose as they worked together to prepare both the school and plans for Wade's potential relocation. He located a small property at the edge of town that could serve as both home and a base for his reduced cattle operation. Zachary expanded her curriculum to accommodate younger students and varying educational needs. Through it all, their connection deepened. Simple moments, sharing coffee at dawn before heading to the construction site, Wade teaching Zachary to ride a horse properly. Evening walks with Lucy between them wove themselves into the fabric of Zachary's new life, becoming as essential to her as breathing. Yet neither had spoken openly of their feelings, an unacknowledged boundary still separating them despite their growing closeness. Zachary, raised in a world where marriages were often strategic alliances rather than love matches, found herself hesitant to trust the emotions Wade stirred within her. And Wade, still carrying the weight of his loss, seemed equally cautious. The turning point came unexpectedly, on what was to be Wade and Lucy's final evening in Aurora, before returning to their homestead to prepare for the move. A summer thunderstorm, reminiscent of the one that had first brought Zachary to Wade's door, swept through the town with dramatic fury. Lucy, terrified by the thunder, clung to Zachary as they huddled in the hotel's sitting room, the child burying her face against Zachary's shoulder with each thunderclap. "It's all right, sweetheart," Zachary soothed, stroking Lucy's hair. "The storm can't hurt you. We're safe inside. Promise." Lucy whispered. "I promise," Zachary assured her, meeting Wade's gaze over his daughter's head. Something shifted in Wade's expression as he watched them, a realization, a decision. When Lucy finally fell asleep, exhausted by her fears, Wade carried her to bed and returned to find Zachary staring out at the rain-lashed street. "You're good with her," he said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "Better than good. You make her feel safe." "She's easy to love," Zachary replied honestly. Wade turned to her then, his expression open and vulnerable. "And what about her father? Is he easy to love as well?" The directness of the question took Zachary's breath away. In Boston, courtship was a carefully choreographed dance of hints and subtle signals. Wade's straightforward approach was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you," she admitted, her voice barely audible above the rain. "It frightens me how quickly you've become important to me." Wade's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "I never expected to find this again. After Sarah died, I thought that part of my life was over." His other hand gently tilted her face up to his. "But then you arrived, with your fancy carriage and your big dreams, and suddenly the future looked different." "Different how?" Zachary asked, her heart pounding. "Brighter," he said simply. "Full of possibilities I'd stopped believing in." Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating his face sincere, open, hopeful. In that moment of clarity, Zachary realized that all her carefully constructed plans for independence had failed to account for the possibility of finding someone who made her feel more herself, not less. "I came west to build a new life," she said. "I never imagined that life might include love." The word hung between them, honest and powerful. Wade's response was to draw her closer, one hand cradling her face with infinite tenderness. "Zachary Standish," he said softly, "I promised Sarah I would give Lucy a good life, and that's a promise I intend to keep. But I think I can make you a promise too." His eyes searched hers. "If you'll have us a weathered cowboy and his daughter, I promise to spend every day trying to make you as happy as you've made us." Tears welled in Zachary's eyes as she placed her hand over his heart. "I came west, seeking purpose. I found a family." Their first kiss was gentle, a promise sealed beneath the symphony of rain against the windows. When they parted, both were smiling through tears. "Does this mean you're staying?" Lucy's small voice came from the doorway, where she stood in her nightgown, rubbing sleepy eyes. Wade beckoned his daughter to join them, lifting her into his arms. "What would you think about that, little one? About Miss Zachary becoming part of our family?" Lucy's face lit up with joy. "Really? Forever?" "Forever," Zachary confirmed, her heart so full it might burst. "Then we can be happy again," Lucy declared with a child's simple wisdom, wrapping one arm around her father's neck and reaching the other toward Zachary, who stepped into their embrace. The storm outside continued, but within the circle of their arms, Zachary found a peace she had never known before. The journey west had led her not just to Aurora, but to the very heart of what she had truly been seeking, not independence alone, but belonging. The weeks that followed were filled with purpose and preparation. Wade and Lucy returned to their homestead to arrange the move to town, while Zachary threw herself into completing the school. What had begun as a finishing school for young ladies evolved into something more comprehensive: Aurora Educational Academy, open to all the town's children. Letters traveled back and forth between them daily, carried by ranchers and merchants moving between Aurora and the outlying homesteads. Wade's notes were simple but heartfelt, often including small sketches by Lucy or pressed wildflowers from their land. Zachary saved each one, reading them in the evenings when the day's work was done. By late August, the school building was complete enough for classes to begin, with final details to be finished during the term. Zachary had adapted her curriculum, balancing practical frontier skills with academic subjects, and yes, some of the social graces she had originally planned to teach. Her first enrollment included 23 students ranging in age from 6 to 17, a diverse group, representing all segments of Aurora's growing population. The day before classes were to begin, Wade and Lucy arrived in town with their belongings loaded in 2 wagons. Their new home, a modest but sturdy house on the outskirts of Aurora, awaited them. Zachary had helped prepare it, adding touches she thought would make it feel welcoming: curtains at the windows, books on the shelves, a quilt she had commissioned from a local seamstress for Lucy's bed. Watching Wade and his daughter approach their new home, Zachary felt a surge of emotion. This was what she had crossed a continent to find: not just purpose, but family. "Welcome home," she called as Wade helped Lucy down from the wagon. The child ran to her, throwing small arms around Zachary's waist. "Did you miss us? We missed you so much." "Every single day," Zachary assured her, embracing her tightly before looking up at Wade. He stood watching them, his expression one of quiet joy. When their eyes met, something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the journey that had brought them here and the road that lay ahead. That evening, after the wagons were unloaded and Lucy was asleep in her new room, Wade and Zachary sat on the porch steps, gazing at the stars that seemed to hang low over Aurora. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Wade asked, his arm comfortably around her shoulders. Zachary leaned into him, savoring his warmth. "A little. It's one thing to have dreams, another to see them tested in reality." "You'll be magnificent," he assured her. "Those children don't know how lucky they are." "I'm the lucky one," she countered. "A month ago, I was a Boston spinster with grand plans and no idea what I was getting into. Now I have a school, a community, and—" She turned to face him. "And you." Wade's kiss was tender, a promise renewed. When they parted, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box carved with intricate patterns of wildflowers. "I made this," he said, placing it in her hands. "Open it." Inside lay a simple gold band set with a small but perfect sapphire. "It was my mother's," Wade explained. "Sarah never wore it. She had her grandmother's ring, but I've kept it, thinking someday Lucy might want it." He took her hand. "Now I know it was waiting for you." Zachary stared at the ring, then at Wade's earnest face. "Are you asking?" "Zachary Standish, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of being Lucy's mother? Of building this life in Aurora together?" Tears blurred her vision as she nodded. "Yes, yes to all of it." As Wade slipped the ring onto her finger, Zachary realized that her journey west had given her something she had never thought to seek, not just independence or purpose, but love in its purest form. The broken carriage wheel that had seemed a disaster had actually been the first step toward everything her heart had truly desired. Their wedding took place in October, when the aspen trees surrounding Aurora had turned to gold, and the first hint of winter crispness touched the air. The ceremony, held in Aurora's small church, was attended by the entire community, students and their families, ranchers and merchants, everyone who had become part of Zachary's new world. Lucy stood proudly beside them, holding a bouquet that matched Zachary's and beaming as the minister pronounced them husband and wife. When Wade kissed his bride, the church erupted in cheers and applause, celebrating not just a union but the promise it represented for Aurora's future. The school flourished under Zachary's guidance, growing as the town expanded with the arrival of the railroad. Within a year, a second teacher was hired to help with the increasing enrollment. Zachary's dream of bringing education to the frontier became a reality beyond what she had initially envisioned. Wade's cattle business prospered as well, though on a smaller scale than his previous operation. Being closer to town provided advantages for selling and shipping his stock, and the additional time with his family more than compensated for any adjustments to his ranching methods. Their home, initially modest, expanded to accommodate their growing family when Zachary gave birth to twins, a boy and girl they named William and Sarah, just over a year after their wedding. Lucy, now 9, embraced her role as big sister with enthusiasm, reading to the babies and helping care for them with mature responsibility. On the twins' first birthday, as autumn again painted Aurora in rich hues of gold and crimson, Wade and Zachary stood on their porch watching Lucy lead the toddlers in wobbly steps across the yard. "Did you ever imagine this?" Wade asked, his arm around her waist. "When your carriage broke down at my homestead, did you ever think we'd end up here?" Zachary leaned her head against his shoulder, watching their children play in the golden afternoon light. "Never. I came west seeking independence, determined to need no one." She turned to meet his gaze, her eyes filled with the quiet joy that had become the foundation of their life together. "Instead, I found that true freedom comes from loving and being loved." Wade's kiss was as tender as their first, a reaffirmation of the promise that had changed both their lives. "Then I'd say that broken wheel was the luckiest accident that ever happened." As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, painting the sky in breathtaking shades of pink and purple, Zachary silently agreed. The journey that had begun with a broken carriage had led her not just to Aurora, but to her true home in Wade's arms, with their children's laughter as the sweetest music she had ever known. In the years that followed, Aurora grew into a prosperous town, with the Standish family at the heart of its development. The school expanded to include a high school program, sending several graduates east to college, something unimaginable when Zachary had first arrived. Wade and Zachary's partnership flourished in all aspects of their life together. They faced challenges, harsh winters, economic downturns, the usual trials of raising children, but always as a united front, their bond only strengthening with each obstacle overcome. Lucy grew into a poised young woman who combined her father's practicality with Zachary's refinement, eventually becoming a teacher herself at the school her stepmother had founded. The twins, William and Sarah, brought different gifts to the family. William inherited his father's affinity for ranching and the land, while Sarah showed early signs of her namesake's healing spirit, fascinated by medicine and science. On the 10th anniversary of her arrival in Wyoming, Zachary sat at her desk in the school, writing in her journal as dusk gathered outside the windows. The building around her had grown from her simple vision to a thriving institution that served as the educational and cultural center of Aurora. "Still working?" Wade's voice came from the doorway, where he stood with a bouquet of wildflowers gathered from the prairie. Zachary smiled, closing her journal. "Just reflecting. It's been 10 years today since my carriage broke down and changed everything." Wade crossed the room to place the flowers on her desk, then leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Any regrets about the life you might have had in Boston?" "Not one," she assured him, rising to embrace him properly. "Every dream I had has been fulfilled here, and so many I never dared to dream." As they walked home together through the twilight, hand in hand, Zachary reflected on the journey that had brought her west. The broken carriage wheel that had seemed a disaster had actually been the beginning of everything good in her life, proof that sometimes the best destinations are those we never plan to reach. And in the warm light of their home, where their children waited and love had built a foundation stronger than any Boston mansion, Zachary knew with absolute certainty that she had found something far more precious than independence she had found belonging.